Hey everybody. Today I'm pretty excited as we start the book Unwrapping the Pharaohs, and we're going to talk about ancient Egypt, and going to be very excited. I'm excited about it. And remember, as we've been going through different studies and different things, we're talking about two different worldviews. The first, the evolutionistic view, and then the biblical view. So as we get into Egypt, I want to start out with looking at both those viewpoints, okay? The evolution view says that humans evolved from lesser creatures over millions of years ago. Then, approximately 100,000 years ago, we had primitive human species. And then human skills developed between 10 and 20,000 years ago. And then the first civilizations about 5,500 years ago, which would be in Sumer in Egypt. Okay? So they go take their Egypt starting, roughly 5,500 years ago. The biblical view says that fully developed humans were highly intelligent, created by God in 6 days and approximately 6,000 years ago. And that there was a worldwide flood approximately 4,300 years ago where Noah and his family survived. And one of Noah's grandsons was a guy named Mizraim, who was the father of Egyptians. So the Egypt is starting roughly 4,300 years ago. Egypt stands out as the oldest continuous civilization according to both worldviews. So no matter which one you look at, you're looking at roughly about the same period of time and one of the oldest continuous civilizations that there are. What we're going to do as we go through this book is a lot of comparisons. We're going to look at the archaeological evidence from ancient Egypt versus the Bible and see how they relate. We're going to compare Bible records about life and events in the past with Egyptian records, and we're going to show that there is a remarkable corroboration between the two. There's going to be a lot of things that are the same. The relics of Egypt and the books of the Bible are two of the oldest records of human history that we have. So when you think about Egypt, what do you think about? Probably pyramids and mummies. That's what most people think, right? Pyramids and mummies. And we're going to talk a lot more about those things and specifics of those things as we go through this book. But first of all, we're just going to cover some basics because this is just the introduction part of it. So also, when you look at Egypt, you want to talk about dynasties, okay? And a dynasty usually regarded as a line of kings descending from father to son. There are 30 Egyptian dynasties. And we get these dynasties from a man named Manetho, who was an Egyptian priest and historian. And around the 3rd century of BC, he started compiling records and putting things together. And he's the one who decided we have 30 Egyptian dynasties. The very first dynasty is probably a king named Menes. Okay, he's identified with a person named Narmer who left stone pallets, and they were found in southern Egypt in 1898. And this point commemorates the unification of Egypt. You also have a historian named Eusebius Pamphilus, who was also known as the Bishop of Caesarea in Palestine. He lived in the 4th century AD. And this is where it gets a little interesting when you start comparing, remember, like ancient records with the Bible. This man says that he identified Menes as Mescria, as we stated a few minutes ago, was the grandson of Noah. Early dynasties did some different things. And this is just a general overview. We're going to cover some more of this later. But the general dynasties buried bodies in the sand, and they also used to bury them in things called mastabas. Okay, but the bodies were very poorly processed. They didn't last very long. They started to decay. The active embalming was developed later and was definitely preferred by the 18th dynasty. However, what are we talking about? Pyramids and mummies, okay? When you talk about Egypt, one of the first pyramids you're going to talk about are the pyramids of Giza, right? It's the most famous pyramids that are going to be in Egypt. The ones, usually if you see a picture, if you thought of a picture when you started thinking about the pyramids, it's the pyramids of Giza. So let's talk about a few facts. It's on the outskirts of the city of Cairo, and they dominate the landscape. When I was in the Marine Corps, I had a friend of mine who was on embassy duty in Cairo, And he would send me pictures and just make us all jealous about, oh, look at the, walk by the pyramids again today. I can see the pyramids from my barracks room. And so they definitely dominate the landscape. They were erected by the kings of Dynasty 4, and they are a wonder to both scholars and visitors alike. There's 3 pyramids there. The largest of these pyramids was built for King Khufu, who the Greeks called Cheops. It was 751 feet from corner to corner, and originally 479 feet tall. They used a lot of stones, and I know we'll talk more about some of this later, but approximately 3 million stones, weighing 30 tons each, and they were cut into 1-foot squares. If you took all of those stones, you'd go halfway around Australia or outline the entire United States. A little bit crazy. So why pyramids? Why did they decide to use pyramids? And in order to discover why, they embalm people and they use pyramids, you have to look at the religious beliefs of the Egyptian people. They worshiped many different gods, and they believed greatly in the afterlife. 2 of the major entities or things that they believed in the afterlife were Ka, which dwelt in tombs of the deceased and could reoccupy the mummified body. Okay, the Ka. The other one is the Ba, which could leave the tomb and travel the Nile or enjoy outdoor life and return to the tomb at night. And 2 of the things that were absolutely necessary, according to the religious beliefs, for the Ba was the preservation of the body, which is why we got embalmed and they mummified things. The other was security of the body, protection from predators and tomb raiders. And so put those 2 together, they had to embalm and mummify bodies to protect it. And then they built these great pyramids to protect it as well. Embalming originally, when it was started to get to the point where it was doing well, they would remove organs. They would remove the brain through the nose, and internal organs they would remove from the belly, and they would store these in jars. Usually 4 different jars, and like I said, we'll talk some more about that later. There's going to be a specific thing about that. Usually after they did this, it would remain for about 40 days. They would take the body and immerse it with this natron powder for drying, so they could dry the body. They'd do that and last for about 40 days. After that, they would remove the natron. The body would get wrapped in linen cloths, covered with resin and beeswax. And they did this, and there was a Persian word, it was bitumen, which meant mummifying, okay? Then they'd sew the body up, and all that could take approximately 70 days. And then they would store it in whatever tomb or place, pyramid that they had. Lastly, we'll just talk for a minute about what does the Bible say? Joseph was, enslaved and went to Egypt, eventually became a powerful ruler in Egypt. And if you look in the Bible, in Genesis 50, verse 26, it says, "So Joseph died at the age of 110 years, and they embalmed him and placed him in a coffin in Egypt." So the Bible gives kind of reference to that as well, to the mummification process and embalming process. And so as we go through this, I'm very excited about ancient Egypt, and we're going to talk about all the different pyramids and different things. And I'm looking forward to it, and we'll talk more about it as we go on. Hopefully you'll learn to enjoy it and like it as well. Thanks.